Good evening. I'm Mike Cutters. And when it comes to power, fear, and influence, perhaps no one man in American history has even come close to J. Edgar Hoover. For nearly half a century, from the FBI's inception in 1924 until his death in 1972, J. for John Edgar Hoover was the only director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. During this time, with papers like these, Hoover's heavy hand held sway over presidents and movie stars, captains of industry, and commanders of armies. These are J. Edgar Hoover's top secret files, documents that he clearly never believed would be exposed to public view. Hoover spent a lifetime collecting the information for these files, and they detail the most intimate moments, most influential people of our time. Tonight, for the first time on television, we'll open these files and reveal just what kind of information Hoover was holding. We'll see how he got it and how he used it to gently blackmail his way into a position of power. During his nearly 5 decades in office, Hoover served 8 presidents, but in reality, his behind-the-scenes political clout was sometimes even greater than theirs. Calvin Coolidge, during whose administration Hoover was appointed, probably never even heard of him. And Herbert Hoover, he was no relation, probably didn't either until his term was virtually finished. Franklin Roosevelt was president when Hoover first began to flex his political muscle. And Harry Truman saw Hoover consolidate his power even further. Under Dwight Eisenhower, Hoover switched his main focus from crime to communism. John F. Kennedy became a major target for Hoover's snooping even before he was president. And their hatred for one another was an open Washington secret. Lyndon Johnson became an avid reader of Hoover's juiciest bedtime material on leaders and lawmakers. And with Richard Nixon, Hoover finally got a president he could agree with politically, even if Nixon wanted to dump him. But as the presidents came and went, Hoover remained constant. And his power grew constantly, and all the time, he was adding volume after volume to these damning documents that became his secret files. And if senators and presidents could become Hoover's victims, then what chance did the likes of Marilyn Monroe or Elvis Presley have against the director? For the next 2 hours, we'll expose these documents to reveal not only what they contained, but how they were used by Hoover in his own pursuit of personal power. These innocent-looking papers packed enough political dynamite to alter the course of our nation itself. These are the secret files of J. Edgar Hoover.
Next, the biggest names, the most famous faces, and the FBI director's recipe for blackmail.
From Touchstone Pictures, when the powerful governor of Louisiana had a love affair with the queen of Bourbon Street, it shocked the state
Mr. Governor.
and threatened to destroy his career.
What about that striptease dancer?
She's hurting you.
But despite the risks
I'm staying with Earl.
and despite the pressure,
Give her up, Governor. Hell no.
nothing could destroy their love.
May Star. Better get used to it.
Paul Newman, Lolita Davidovich,
You're the prettiest thing that I ever saw.
Blaze, rated R. Starts Wednesday, December 13th in select cities.
Hey, guys.
We found a cool new way to get vitamin C.
Really?
No kidding. Look, new nice vitamin C drops.
Yeah?
You get a full day's supply of vitamin C in every cool, soothing drop.
Well, what do you think?
Real
tasty.
cool. New from those cold experts at Nice.
Its strength is legendary. It's virtually indestructible. Nothing works like Reynolds Wrap.
Tropicana Pure Premium Orange Juice has only one ingredient, so no other major brand comes closer to this than this. Now, what are you waiting for? Try it. Oh yes, there is one other thing. Pure Premium now comes in a slightly larger package. 96 ounces, to be exact.
Today's Duracell battery is quite simply a cut above. That's because it lasts up to 30% longer than the one from a few years back. Duracell. You can't top the Copper Top.
There are some 6 million stories in J. Edgar Hoover's secret files, so the odds are pretty good that one of them could be about you or someone you know. And later in tonight's show, we'll tell you how to find out if the FBI was watching you and how to get a copy of your own FBI file. Now, with such a massive amount of material, we had to be very selective, even in a 2-hour program such as this. So, while some of the files will be examined in detail, we can just bring you the highlights of others. The main targets for Hoover and the prying eyes and ears of his thousands of special agents were the rich and the famous and the politically powerful. They were the opinion makers of Washington and the movie makers of Hollywood, the names that made America's front page news. With us through tonight's broadcast will be veteran Washington investigative reporter Jack Anderson.
I think J. Edgar Hoover started the file just to protect the image of the FBI, but he discovered that it was a very useful tool in exercising power, and he could use it for blackmail.
Also with us live tonight are correspondents Thayer Walker and Wendy Gordon. Thayer has been studying Hoover's Washington files, and Wendy has been doing the same with his Hollywood secrets. It seems that one continuing thread runs through all of Hoover's tactics: sex and sexual innuendo. And the director worked hard at cataloging bedroom histories, especially if the subjects of his investigations were Hollywood stars. Wendy Gordon has been poring over the long list of Hollywood names in the secret files, and she has a preview of some of the details we'll disclose on tonight's program. Wendy?
Mike, early on, Hoover realized that one of the best ways he could increase his own power would be to gain important leverage against the men and women who created American ideals, the image makers of Hollywood.
I've been waiting for this.
The year was 1935. The picture was G-Men, starring a young actor named James Cagney. And J. Edgar Hoover was beginning his lifelong relationship with the movies.
If Leggett killed Buchanan, I want him. I'm going over your head, McCord.
With Cagney playing a hard-nosed FBI agent, Hoover saw the first of many opportunities to add luster to his empire. He put the film's producers in his pocket with offers of unlimited help and advice, even opening up his crime files to make sure the picture was pro-FBI. But playing Mr. Nice Guy would only take him so far. To really gain control, he'd have to start collecting damning information about studio kingpins and their stars. And so while his agents in Washington were spying on politicians, his West Coast minions began their campaign of garnering information on Hollywood's bedroom habits, drug use, drinking bouts, and wild parties. Anything that Hoover felt would give him blackmail potential was fair game for his prying eyes. And tonight, as those secret files are opened, we'll see what they say about Rock Hudson, why his homosexuality became a target for Hoover's snoopers, and how Hoover feared that a Hudson film assignment could pose a threat to the Bureau itself. John Lennon, and why the Bureau may have tried to entrap him for a serious crime. Marilyn Monroe, the sex goddess of the century, who not only captured the hearts and minds of millions of men, but the eyes and ears of Hoover and his agents. And Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, who commanded Hoover's scrutiny for over 10 years and earned a secret file over 600 pages long. The bigger a star was, the more interested Hoover was in putting him in his files. One graphic example of what we're going to show you tonight is the file compiled on one of the movie's biggest names, singer Bing Crosby. The press lauded Crosby as a family man and philanthropist, but Hoover knew another Crosby, the secret life of a hard-drinking playboy whose troubles were kept out of sight from his adoring fans.
File date, June 21, 1937. Memorandum for the director. An extremely serious situation exists at present in Hollywood, California, which is reported from a most reliable source, to be overrun at the present time with all types and kinds of racketeers who are preying upon prominent persons in the motion picture industry. The report goes on to mention that one blackmailer is reported in one instance to have received $10,000 from Bing Crosby. The document hints the blackmailer might have been one of many procurers in Hollywood.
And while Crosby was famous for portraying good guys, his FBI file shows friendships with the underworld. The document, headlined Top Hoodlum Program, tells of a secret Crosby invitation to meet with Midwestern and Las Vegas mob king Mo Dalitz.
And this heavily censored 1947 file tells Hoover that when police raided an illegal California casino, they netted 100 patrons, among them Bing Crosby, who was permitted to leave.
And the Crosby file, Mike, is just a small sample of the type of material Hoover had stockpiled on scores of show business personalities. We'll be bringing you many of those stories tonight.
Thank you, Wendy. Correspondent Thayer Walker is standing by with a report on how, with slight variations, Hoover's Hollywood tactics worked just as well against the lawmakers in our nation's capital. Thayer?
Mike, the legal role of the FBI is clearly defined by federal statutes. Basically, its job is to investigate certain crimes, such as bank robbery and kidnapping, and to investigate matters of espionage or sabotage or subversive activities. And so whatever Hoover found out, he was supposed to tell his boss, the Attorney General, so the bad guys could be arrested and put on trial. But J. Edgar Hoover didn't want his influential quarry behind bars. He wanted them to remain in their high-profile positions where he could control their lives. Whatever else he was, John Edgar Hoover was a master manipulator of innuendo. If a senator had a drunken binge, if a congressman cheated on his wife, if a cabinet member was caught with his hand in the till, Hoover would find out. It was said that he held the reputation of every congressman and senator in the palm of his hand, and he made sure they knew it. So it was no surprise that even during the Depression, despite red lines and gut-wrenching poverty, Congress somehow always found the money to keep the FBI growing, and Hoover happy. And Hoover didn't stop with Congress, as our revelations from Hoover's secret files will show tonight. Far from being immune, the presidents would often find themselves under J. Edgar Hoover's blackmailing thumb. We'll see FBI reports on a secret love affair involving First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt. We'll see the files on the investigations of Dwight Eisenhower's love affairs and rumors he was about to divorce wife Mamie to marry a wartime girlfriend. We'll see Hoover's secret files on 20 years of John F. Kennedy's sex life, including 2 explosive reports on affairs that were reportedly covered up to protect the White House.
Mr. President.
And we'll see the FBI files on a supposed connection between Lyndon Johnson and this clandestine Washington club that was believed to pair call girls with congressmen.
I have a dream today.
No one was a greater victim of Hoover's insidious snooping than civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. And we'll explore that, too. All these stories and more, Mike, are part of the official FBI documents that we'll be revealing tonight for the first time.
Thanks, Thayer, and we'll be seeing more of those reports later. And we'll be back in just a moment to continue our examination of the secret files of J. Edgar Hoover.
Next, the rise of J. Edgar Hoover, gangsters grandstanding and grabbing public funds.
Join the fun. Call 1-900-226-3333. The National Party Connection.
Well, I'm blonde hair, blue eyes.
Are you good looking?
I think so.
You never know who you'll end up talking to. Call 1-900-226-3333 now. It's live.
Oh, terrific. I'll wear my new miniskirt. You'll love it.
That sounds terrific. I can't wait to meet you.
What are you waiting for? Call the National Party Connection now.
I called. Why don't you?
Mount Reed Toyota Volkswagen Spring Fling Deal. Here's the Barish's holiday gift to you. Buy a new Toyota from Mount Reed and we'll make your payments till spring. That's right, you'll make no payments till April 1990. Come into Mount Reed today and choose from Mount Reed's great selection of Camrys, Corollas, Celicas, MR2s, and even trucks. And make no payments till the snow is melting. But the only place you can get a Toyota with no payments till April is at Mount Reed. No payments till April 1990.
At Ryder's Furniture Warehouse Outlet, we're going to change the way you shop for furniture with unbeatable warehouse to your house prices every day. Warehouse to your house means you'll save like never before on name brand furniture for every room in your home. So why wait for a sale? The beautiful furniture you've dreamed of is affordable today at Ryder's Furniture Warehouse Outlet, Brighton Henrietta Town Line Road next to BJ's Wholesale Club and Exchange Street in Geneva.
Monday, 2 city cops hunt down an AWOL soldier.
Not equipped to do this.
And are lured into a deadly trap. 21 Jump Street. Then, on Alien Nation, the world's oldest profession is about to offer something new.
Do I have to go? Yes, honey. You'll be fine.
Well, what have we here?
What's a prostitute?
Well, Matthew's been with a prostitute. Perhaps he can explain.
Monday on Fox 31, Cable Channel 7.
This nation is asking for action, and action now.
1932. Franklin D. Roosevelt, with the promise of a New Deal and an end to prohibition, unseats Herbert Hoover as President of the United States. But violent crime, much of it spawned by prohibition, was plaguing the nation. Most of it was centered in Chicago, where some 5,000 people had been gunned down in the streets in the past 10 years. Things in Chicago were so bad that Congress at one point even considered sending in the Marines because America had no national police force. But it wasn't until the early 1930s that Congress decided to put the federal government in the crime-fighting business, reacting to notorious events like the Lindbergh babies' kidnap murder and the rise of racketeering. The man who'd lead America's crime busters was already in Washington and jumped at the chance to become the nation's top cop. J. Edgar Hoover was running a little-known arm of the Justice Department called the Bureau of Investigation since 1924, when he was just 29 years old. To give the Bureau of Investigation a little more authority, the word federal was added to its title. And for the first time, its 400 agents were given guns, and J. Edgar Hoover became the government's first chief of police. The man was in the spotlight, and he was off and running. With his newfound funding, Hoover quickly set up a sophisticated crime lab using state-of-the-art equipment for fingerprinting and identifying suspects. And he also set up a thorough training program for his newly armed agents. And with his newfound authority, Hoover quickly set up a system of discipline that could be only described as intimidation. He began referring to himself as the director, and that's what his men called him too, at least to his face. Before an agent was called into the director's office, he was carefully briefed on how to act. Scuffing your feet on his brand new carpet was a definite no-no. And when you talked to Hoover, you were told to look him straight in the eyes and to keep looking there. The director stood 5 feet 9 inches tall, but he felt that for a man of growing national stature, he needed a larger physical stature. So when meeting with his agents, he sometimes stood on a box concealed beneath his desk. By looking at Hoover straight in the eyes, you were not supposed to notice his secret soapbox. One story that points up just how much fear Hoover instilled in his agents concerns the fact that he always demanded wide margins in all reports he received, to give him room to write in his own personal comments. On a report from one agent, Hoover felt the margins were too narrow. In what space he had, he scratched in the words, "Watch the borders." Now, thinking the director was issuing a major order and not daring to question him, the agent called for a special FBI alert on America's borders with Mexico and Canada, which lasted several weeks. Now, Hoover could be equally obsessive about other matters. For example, the physical appearance of his agents. Now, columnist Jack Anderson told us that even though Richard Nixon could win voter approval as president, he couldn't pass muster as an FBI candidate.
He was turned down, if I know my J. Edgar Hoover, for one reason and one reason only. Hoover didn't like his looks. I mean, with that long sloping nose and that and that 5 o'clock shadow, he didn't look like an FBI agent.
Hoover may have been a prejudiced, bad-tempered boss, but his effectiveness in battling Depression-era outlaws was without question. Nothing boosted Hoover's rise to power and glory as much as the killing of public enemy number 1, John Dillinger. By 1934, Dillinger was wanted for a dozen bank robberies and as many murders, including police officers and Hoover's own G-men. On the night of July 24th, acting on a tip from a Dillinger girlfriend, G-men led by Melvin Purvis surrounded their man outside a Chicago movie theater. When Dillinger came out and reached for his gun, agents shot and killed the fabled public enemy. But the publicity and acclaim were awarded to Purvis. The director was outraged, so much so that he mounted a smear campaign against Purvis, finally forcing him to resign. Some 30 years later, Melvin Purvis shot himself to death using the same weapon he carried the night he got John Dillinger. Although Hoover delighted in shootouts with the gun-toting thugs of the 30s, when it came to facing the organized crime leaders of more recent times, Hoover backed off considerably.
J. Edgar Hoover wanted nothing to do with organized crime because organized crime was a difficult assignment. It was almost impossible to crack. He found it much more productive, for example, tracing stolen cars. He could find stolen cars. So if there was a difficult crime to solve, well, he would try to push that into someone else's jurisdiction.
Hoover may have held his FBI agents up to strict standards and would have fired agents for compulsive gambling, but was himself a lifetime horse player and often accepted valuable gifts from rich friends. When he wanted a vacation, he could always count on Texas millionaires Clint Murchison and Sid Richardson to lay out nice rooms, meals, and drinks at their resort hotel. He never saw a bill. Hoover's influential pals also helped guide his investments, even reportedly buying shares for him. As important as Hoover's job was, it was still a civil service position with a relatively modest salary. And yet, at the time of his death in 1972, J. Edgar Hoover was reported to have died a millionaire. As much as Hoover liked freeloading vacations, there was no place he enjoyed visiting more than Hollywood. He was wined and dined by the biggest names in town, and the high visibility his visits brought him were all part of his game plan. But as we shall see in a moment, many of those same stars that made Hoover the toast of the town were unwittingly playing roles in a scenario they didn't even know existed.
Next, Hoover and Hollywood, the star's secret lives, and the director's own sexual mystery.
You know what I like best about tap dancing? It's not the legs. And I can practice on linoleum. After Mom picks me up from tap lessons, I keep her company while she makes dinner. Tap dancing makes you very hungry, especially for burgers and all-righted tater tots. Life would be perfect if I could eat tater tots every day and the whole world was covered with linoleum.
Sometimes what you take off your skin is even more important than what you put on it. So we created Episage. Its 3 continuously rotating brushes bursting with water buff away dry, flaking skin, massage, and help reduce the appearance of cellulite. To leave your skin feeling soft, fresh, and looking beautiful. In minutes, it'll make a new person out of you and brush away the old. Episage. It'll brush your skin beautiful by Epi.
Cologne for Men from Prince Machiavelli.
When Ocean Spray adds sweet plump strawberries to tangy cranberries, something cool and refreshing happens to salads. Cran Fruit brand sauces add a cool, refreshing zing to everything.
Black & Decker presents the new Power Pro Dustbuster Plus. With its extra power setting, it'll pick up wet, dry, messy. The list is endless. The new Power Pro Dustbuster Plus Vac from Black & Decker.
It's somewhat ironic that J. Edgar Hoover, who liked to be called the director, found himself so much at home in a town where the director is often king. And in publicity-conscious Hollywood, the intense director was deep into the game of seeing and being seen. But there was more to it than that. Hoover knew that the creative talents in Hollywood were the most powerful opinion makers in the world. And he wanted to make sure that the world's opinion of his agency and himself would be nothing less than wonderful. But just in case some of those people didn't want to cooperate, Hoover made it a point to find out about those skeletons that hang in just about everybody's closet. Much of the information he dug up is contained in the secret files. And correspondent Wendy Gordon has the details.
There are literally thousands of pages in Hoover's Hollywood files, Mike, and they contain hundreds of dark celebrity secrets that show he used his star connections as a double-edged sword. Hoover was not above doing favors for his favored friends, but at the same time, these friends were quite likely to end up in his secret files. Any agent worth his salt was well aware of Hoover's never-spoken command: get whatever you can on any celebrity and send the information directly to me. Movie tough guy Edward G. Robinson and legendary leading man Spencer Tracy were hounded by Hoover because he thought they associated with communist subversives. Humphrey Bogart's FBI file also was packed with references to communists and communist front organizations. Hoover, in fact, often used the fear of communism as a weapon for his own ends, and according to Jack Anderson, an excuse for wholesale harassment.
I'm sure out of genuine patriotism, he became concerned about the communist issue. The problem was he didn't know how to define a communist. Anybody got to in the end that anybody who disagreed with J. Edgar Hoover was a communist.
When it came to collecting juicy smear-type tidbits about Hollywood royalty, no gossip columnist could top J. Edgar Hoover. When thieves made off with Natalie Wood's diamonds, the incident was filed by Hoover. When sex queen Jane Mansfield made a movie his informers considered obscene, Hoover created a file. And long after Grace Kelly left Hollywood to become the Princess of Monaco, Hoover kept up his file on the woman and her personal affairs. Even in the dark wartime days of 1942, when very real threats of spying, sabotage, and espionage were top FBI priorities, Hoover's hidden celebrity agenda was dutifully carried out by agents.
Welcome to Sherwood, my lady.
And in the 1940s, there was no bigger star for their sights than Errol Flynn, the swashbuckling actor whose romantic escapades, both on and off screen, were the stuff of Hollywood legend. At first, it seems that Hoover's interest in Flynn may have been legitimate. There was a real question of why this superb athlete would have been declared 4F, physically unfit for military service, by his Hollywood draft board.
June 22, 1942. Ray Errol Flynn, Selective Service. It is desired that you immediately check the records of the local Selective Service Board covering the residence of Errol Flynn and review Flynn's Selective Service file. This inquiry should be conducted in a very discreet manner so that the fact it is being made will not be publicized. In other words, for Hoover's eyes only. The investigation produced this report, saying that Flynn and another man were given a 4F classification under the Selective Service for the reason that they were both physically unfit. The report went on to say that both of these men were examined and were reported to have a spot in their lungs, and that the medical report showing this condition cost each of these persons $5,000.
The report clearly implies that Flynn bought his way out of the Army, a federal offense. But there are no reports of any further action by Hoover. Obviously, Hoover was more interested in having some clout over Flynn than he was in seeing him go to jail. Shortly after the Flynn draft investigation, this field report was sent to Hoover, leaving little doubt about what the director was looking for.
Errol Flynn is well known to all sources contacted during the course of this investigation. Flynn is described as a highly sexed individual. He is regarded as a person of low moral character with absolutely no regard for women, who has had affairs with every woman he has been associated with in motion pictures.
And that would be a lot of women. Continuing its Flynn surveillance, the FBI was apparently on the scene during a publicity tour for his classic Western movie Santa Fe Trail, and an agent filed this report.
It reveals that an unidentified actress was drugged, following which she was raped by Errol Flynn. Flynn allegedly made bets with certain friends that he could accomplish this feat, and as a result, the actress tried to commit suicide and had to be flown back to Los Angeles for hospitalization.
While Errol Flynn was considered to be Hollywood's womanizing bad boy, debonair Cary Grant was raking in his own box office millions as Hollywood's most graceful and sophisticated leading man. But Grant's well-mannered style, both on and off screen, didn't stop Hoover from creating a Cary Grant file. When Grant was once invited to visit the White House, the Bureau was asked to make a routine check. Grant underwent psychotherapy, the agency reported back, and was treated with the drug LSD. The late actor Rock Hudson was a special target of Hoover's, and for reasons that demonstrate quite clearly how the director would use the Bureau's resources for his own personal ends. In a secret file we've uncovered entitled Hollywood Vice, there's a report of a raid on a 1960 Los Angeles party that apparently turned into an orgy. A list of alleged participants was confiscated. Among these, states the report, are the names of movie actors, including Rock Hudson. This was well before there was any public hint of Hudson's homosexuality, but Hoover knew of that, too, long before the public. From the secret files, this is a 1966 report forwarded directly to Hoover from a field agent.
A confidential informant reported that several years ago, while he was in New York, he had an affair with movie star Rock Hudson. The informant stated from personal knowledge that he knew that Rock Hudson was a homosexual. The belief was expressed that by personal knowledge, the informant meant that he had personally indulged in homosexual acts with Hudson or had witnessed or received information from the individuals who had done so.
But Hoover's interest in Hudson went beyond the actor's bed partners. Using such undercover intelligence, the director concluded that Rock Hudson's lifestyle could directly threaten the FBI's image.
To the director, FBI, subject, portrayal of FBI in motion picture. The report stated that in a planned new movie, Hudson's role is that of an FBI agent. The real-life agent went on to promise that the Los Angeles office will conduct additional inquiry into the film.
And to the surprise of no one in the FBI, the movie was never made. Liberace, who like Hudson would die of AIDS, is also prominently featured in the secret files we have uncovered. In a report entitled Homex, Compromise and Extortion of Homosexuals, the FBI described bars and restaurants visited by Liberace as places in the Greenwich Village area that cater to lesbians and homosexuals. Ironically, while Hoover was tracking homosexuals, he himself may have been leading a homosexual lifestyle with his best friend Clyde Tolson. In fact, Hoover personally engineered Tolson's meteoric rise inside the FBI, so that Tolson was made an assistant director just 3 years after enlisting. The two were almost inseparable, taking very personal and sometimes even sensual snapshots of each other and dining together virtually every night in posh Washington restaurants. And whenever Hoover took one of those California vacations, Tolson shared his poolside bungalow. Hoover never married and was rarely, if ever, seen with a woman. Hoover, we've discovered, even enlisted the FBI to protect his most personal secrets, starting a file on threats that might have exposed his hidden life. And this document from the Hoover file shows how the director could dispatch his men to quash what he thought were vicious lies. It reveals that when a Cleveland, Ohio woman mentioned to associates that Hoover was queer, an FBI informant quickly apprised the Bureau. The next file entry, marked personal and confidential for Mr. Tolson, shows that Cleveland FBI brass faced Hoover's accuser and chastised her most vigorously so that she thoroughly understood the untruth of her statements and the serious nature of her action in having made them. A handwritten note at the end of the report tells us that the director was fully advised of his agent's attempt to keep up appearances. Randy Schultz is national correspondent for the San Francisco Chronicle and recently broke headline-making stories about the FBI and Hoover himself. Was the director gay?
If J. Edgar Hoover was not gay, then he did a very, very precise imitation of somebody who was. Look at the relationship with Clyde Tolson. Clyde Tolson, lifelong companion, inseparable. Every morning, J. Edgar Hoover took his limousine past Tolson's apartment, picked him up. They spent the day together. When Hoover died, he did not will anything to any of his blood relatives, but left everything to Clyde Tolson. And then when Tolson died himself in 1975, he was buried not far from the grave of his lifelong companion.
Whatever his sexual preferences, Hoover never stopped trying to censor any real or imagined assaults on his Bureau's reputation by Hollywood. He directed his men to fight any slur on the FBI's image. That Hoover image management continued right to the end. In 1971, a year before he would die, Hoover was told by an agent that Jane Fonda was to star in the suspense movie Klute. Concerned the Fonda film would have an FBI character, agents created this file to ensure that immediate steps would be taken to have the FBI portrayal deleted. The file also contained the Bureau's opinion of Jane, referring to Fonda's sordid personal life as well as her association with dissidents and the Black Panthers. And Hoover, never doubting his files would remain secret, rashly scribbled his own reaction in one of those wide margins.
Certainly, I don't want any reference to the FBI in any picture in which this tramp, Jane Fonda, appears.
The list of Hollywood names goes on, Mike. Jane's father, Henry Fonda, has a file, as do numerous other Oscar winners.
Thanks, Wendy. We're looking forward to more of your reports later on in the broadcast. One of the most lengthy and one of the most revealing of all the files we've uncovered concern an entertainer who burst onto the scene like a shooting star and then burned out just as quickly in a dense atmosphere of drugs, sex, rock and roll, and that explosive file next.
Next, the FBI and Elvis Presley. Secret Files report blackmail and revenge.
This is Fox 31, Cable Channel 7.
Come on, do it. Call the newest party line in the country. Call the line that has everyone talking. Pick up the phone, call 1-900-226-4444. Do it. Call now and meet someone special. There's a party going on, so join in. Call 1-900-226-4444. It's live and it's fun, so go ahead, do it. Call now.
Create a more memorable wedding with creative silk flowers from Dan's. A bountiful garden in a rainbow of silken shades assures handcrafted floral pieces exactly as you've dreamed. Dan's own bridal consultant works with you to design everlasting bouquets, hair pieces, and bridal hats, party favors, flower baskets, and centerpieces. Ribbons and lace, how-to books, and special classes make it easy, fulfilling, and fun. Beautiful weddings begin at Dan's Crafts and Things, Empire Boulevard in Irondequoit between 590 North and Culver Road.
Mount Reed Toyota Volkswagen Spring Fling Deal. Here's the Barish's holiday gift to you. Buy a new Toyota from Mount Reed and we'll make your payments till spring. That's right, you'll make no payments till April 1990. Come into Mount Reed today and choose from Mount Reed's great selection of Camrys, Corollas, Celicas, MR2s, and even trucks. And make no payments till the snow is melting. But the only place you can get a Toyota with no payments till April is at Mount Reed. No payments till April 1990.
The greatest guitar in rock and roll history has been kidnapped.
B.B. King's guitar is missing.
And guess whose job it is to get it back?
Why don't you just get him another guitar?
We did.
Booker's taking a special interest in this case.
I know where Lucille is.
It's a dirty job.
Give me that guitar. Get it!
But somebody's got to do it.
Lucille!
Sunday at 7 on Fox 31, Cable Channel 7.
There's no doubt that when Elvis Presley burst onto the scene, it was a shock to the American system. The raucous sounds that emanated from his guitar and his vocal cords and his openly sexual gyrations were seldom seen outside of some sleazy Memphis roadhouse. With good reason, they called him Elvis the Pelvis, and the wriggling Mr. Presley seemed to lure the director the way a piece of live bait attracts a hungry shark. Thayer Walker, I guess you've had quite a job going over that thick pile of material on Elvis Presley.
Mike, it's been more like a career than a job. These are some of the 600 pages of material on Elvis that we've unearthed from Hoover's files, and they're filled with some very bizarre tales. They confirm that Hoover was obsessed with his own vision of morality, and that he intended to make himself the guardian of the nation's morals. In 1956, Presley's budding stardom and his earthy performances were ringing alarm bells all over the country. And in Louisville, Kentucky, the police chief had good reason to be alarmed.
Urgent. Elvis Presley. Police cooperation matter. Colonel Carl E. Hustis, Chief of Police, this day advised that Elvis Presley and Bill Haley and his Comets are simultaneously booked for appearances. There have been riots as a result of such appearances, resulting in many thousands of dollars of property damage. Hustis requested information from this bureau in an effort to prevent reoccurrences here.
But just weeks later, the director's obsession with sexual morality became evident, as this letter from an informant found its way into Hoover's secret file.
May 16, 1956. Eyewitnesses have told me that Presley's actions and motions were such as to rouse the sexual passions of teenage youth. One eyewitness described his actions as sexual self-gratification on the stage, another as a striptease with clothes on. Perhaps the hardened police did not get the import of his motions or gestures, like those of riding a microphone.
Soon, FBI agents were joined in their Elvis watch by another government agency, the United States Army. Elvis had been drafted and shipped to West Germany. But Private Presley wasn't your ordinary GI. He lived off-base in a spacious home, drove an expensive BMW sports car, and he even had his own private secretary. But he was not without his problems.
Date, February 3, 1960. Signature, Chief of Army's Investigations Branch, for official use only. Elvis Presley was interviewed on 28 December 1959 concerning his complaint that he was the victim of blackmail.
The blackmail concerned a phony South African doctor who repeatedly wrote letters to Elvis saying he could work wonders with Presley's face and skin. Even though he was only in his 20s, Elvis was worried about what crow's feet could do to a teen idol's future. So when the good doctor showed up, uninvited, on Presley's doorstep one day, the singer let him in. What the quack from South Africa saw when he arrived at Presley's German estate was a scene of definitely unmilitary debauchery. The house was filled with young girls and a select group of Presley's buddies. Elvis and his pals were taking amphetamine so they could stay awake all weekend and indulge in all the pleasures that Presley's fame and money could buy. It was reported that Elvis would slip an Army medic $100 every week in exchange for all the drugs he could carry. But the only thing that seemed to interest the doubtful dermatologist was Elvis himself. Every day for 6 weeks, he gave Elvis a private skin treatment. The man was apparently in love with the singer, and one day he made homosexual advances. Elvis reacted angrily. Charging downstairs, he shouted to his buddies, "Throw this queer out!" And they did. Later that night, however, the doctor returned with a blackmail letter demanding $15,000. Elvis turned the letter over to the provost marshal, who notified the FBI. According to the FBI report, the South African quack not only made homosexual advances, but he threatened to expose Presley by photographs and tape recordings, which are alleged to present Presley in compromising situations. The file reported that the blackmailer threatened to involve Presley's American girlfriend, an apparent reference to 16-year-old Priscilla Beaulieu, whom Presley later married. The Army sent 2 plainclothes MPs to escort the doctor out of the country, but not before Elvis paid off the extortionist. As the years passed, Elvis rose to the pinnacle of success and popularity, and then descended into the depths of drug-induced madness. And in this madness, Elvis would attempt an alliance with 2 of the most unlikely people, Richard Nixon and J. Edgar Hoover. The bizarre tale is in these FBI reports. They reveal that Elvis blamed his decline on his competition. He believed that unconventional performers like the Beatles were threatening American values, to say nothing of his own popularity. In December of 1970, Elvis began a go-for-broke quest to retain his title as King of Rock and Roll, a quest that would ultimately take him directly to the President of the United States. First, Elvis appeared here at the Washington headquarters of the Drug Enforcement Administration, and he got a meeting with the DEA chief, John Finlater. Elvis asked Finlater for a DEA badge so Elvis could join in the war against drugs. Finlater immediately turned him down. Now, Elvis wasn't used to being rejected, so he went right to the top. In a secret trip here to the White House gate, he delivered a handwritten note addressed to President Richard Nixon, requesting a meeting. Now, at the time, Nixon was under siege by the nation's youth, and he thought that a meeting with Elvis might bolster his image, and so he agreed to the visit. It started with a private White House tour.
United States Government Memorandum. Subject, Elvis Presley. Following their tour, Presley privately advised that he has volunteered his services to the President in connection with the narcotics problem.
In that private meeting, Elvis somehow persuaded Nixon to override his drug enforcement chief and approve the issuing of DEA credentials. It's ironic to note that according to the reports, Elvis was high on drugs during his entire meeting with the President of the United States. And there was even more to Presley's master plan. He went on to request a meeting with Hoover himself. But Hoover's aides were not so easily taken in. The director was sent this memo.
Presley's sincerity and good intentions notwithstanding, he is certainly not the type of individual whom the director would wish to meet. It is noted at the present time he is wearing his hair down to his shoulders and indulges in all sorts of exotic dress.
Hoover agreed. Elvis was not the type of individual he wanted to meet, and he had some doubt about Elvis's sincerity and good intentions. Hoover believed Elvis had some ulterior motive in mind, and the best he would let him do was meet with some underlings. Elvis's motive soon became evident. By now, the Beatles were clearly stealing Presley's thunder, and Elvis hoped to unleash the FBI against his rivals.
From the Elvis file, Presley indicated that he is of the opinion that the Beatles laid the groundwork for many of the problems we are having with young people by their filthy, unkempt appearances and suggestive music while entertaining in this country during the middle 60s. Presley tried to persuade the FBI to hound other entertainers as well. From the files, Elvis advised that the Smothers Brothers, Jane Fonda, and other persons in the entertainment industry of their ilk have a lot to answer for in the hereafter for the way they have poisoned young minds by disparaging the United States in their public statements and unsavory activities.
And so, in a desperate effort to butter up the Bureau, Elvis Presley turned FBI informant.
From the files, Presley advised that he wished the director to be aware that he, Presley, from time to time, is approached by individuals and groups in and outside of the entertainment business, whose motives and goals, he is convinced, are not in the best interests of this country. He volunteered to make such information available to the Bureau whenever it came to his attention.
Elvis even entrusted one of his own top secrets to Hoover, his secret unlisted Memphis telephone number. And he created a confidential code name that was shared with Hoover. According to the files, Elvis told the FBI he can be reached under the pseudonym Colonel John Burroughs, 3764 Highway 51, South Memphis, Tennessee, the address of Presley's Graceland home.
Next, confidential files on TV's greatest stars and how the FBI secretly controlled a top-rated program.
This is 100 square yards of the kind of carpet you probably have in your home. Only it isn't in your home. It's in an elementary school. This is the Regina Steamer Carpet Cleaner. Easy to use, doesn't require a sink hookup, and very effective.
Regina Steamer Carpet Cleaner.
I know what you want before you say it. I know the song before you play it. We're just family, you and me. Tyson, feeding you is good as good can be.
At Tyson, we put a little extra into everything we make because we never forget where all our food is going.
Tyson's feeding you like family. Tyson's feeding you.
Its strength is legendary. It's virtually indestructible. Nothing works like Reynolds Wrap.
We'll be back in a few minutes. Oh, my lips are dry.
Don't use plain petroleum jelly. Use Blistex.
Come on. Blistex is for cold sores.
It also works better on dry lips. Blistex contains moisture for faster relief of dryness. Plain petroleum jelly doesn't. Blistex also has 2 medicated ingredients to relieve discomfort.
This doesn't.
Only Blistex has that great lip tip.
Adds moisture, relieves discomfort, lip tip. That makes Blistex ointment better.
There's a foil so strong. When it comes to cooking, it really cleans up. Nothing works like Reynolds Wrap.
By the 1950s, Hollywood was worried about the coming of that new entertainment giant called television. And there was good reason. TV was rapidly becoming king, and that fact was not lost on J. Edgar Hoover. The files on the television industry describe Hoover's methods of controlling the new medium, and correspondent Wendy Gordon has been examining them. Wendy?
Well, Mike, by now Hoover had his procedure down to a system. The master manipulator assigned his agents to watch and report on various programs, and in addition, secret files were opened on the major power brokers in television. J. Edgar Hoover focused his hired eyes and ears on television from its earliest days, and he had it monitored so closely that even a bad joke could get you into trouble. Comedian Groucho Marx found out just how petty Hoover could be when a contestant on his show, You Bet Your Life, described himself as an ex-bootlegger. "You mean," asked Groucho, "an FBI bootlegger?" It was a meaningless throwaway line, but it earned Groucho a place in Hoover's files. The humorless Mr. Hoover was never one to let a remark about himself or his bureau go unchallenged. No one was untouchable, not even Robert Stack, star of ABC's major hit show, The Untouchables. In the show, Stack portrayed Prohibition agent Eliot Ness, but when Stack mentioned the FBI in a TV Guide magazine interview, the agency was outraged. "A friend of mine is an FBI agent," Stack said, "and he's no more like Eliot Ness than I am. They've got so many rules and regulations in his outfit, it's all he can do to blow his nose." That made Hoover blow his top, and it also outraged Clyde Tolson, Hoover's pal and by then associate director. Tolson fired off an indignant letter to Stack.
"You have managed to hold up to scorn and ridicule the valiant past and present efforts of thousands of FBI employees."
The Untouchables was produced by Desi Arnaz, who in addition to playing Lucille Ball's Ricky on the I Love Lucy show, was also one of TV's most powerful producers. And Hoover had suspicions that Desi was linked with communism. But that didn't stop the hypocritical Mr. Hoover from treating Desi as a warm friend. He and Lucy were probably both on Hoover's so-called special correspondent list, important people who were given special favors and VIP treatment by the FBI. One story, in fact, has it that a Los Angeles agent, instructed to check out all Hollywood gossip, reported to Hoover that Lucy had missed a couple of her periods. Knowing what that meant, Hoover phoned Desi to break the news to him that he was about to become a father. The delighted Desi had to be pretty sure that he had a dear friend in Mr. Hoover. On the other hand, at the same time Hoover was keeping track of Lucy's pregnancy, he was also compiling a file on Desi's life that numbered an astounding 200 pages. Desi, of course, knew nothing about this, and he was lulled into such a false sense of security that when he got into a scrape with the Los Angeles police, he understandably tried to call on his pal Edgar for help.
From the files, September 21, 1959. Urgent. To Director from Special Agent in Charge at Los Angeles. Desi Arnaz, prominent TV producer and head of Desilu Productions, arrested Hollywood on drunk charge after an argument with a plainclothesman. Released 1 hour later after posting bail. When booked at the station, Arnaz expressed desire to phone J. Edgar Hoover.
And Desi Arnaz was not alone in this kind of treatment. Actor John Wayne, for example, was one of Hoover's most outspoken public supporters and was a proud FBI special correspondent. But when Wayne was being considered for the highly paid job of narrator of the TV show The FBI, Hoover got this secret memo. It was reported by the Los Angeles office in 1960 that Wayne was a member of the John Birch Society. Even though Hoover may have privately agreed with Wayne's political views, he knew that Wayne's past ties to the ultra-conservative Birch Society would be bad for the FBI's public image. Wayne didn't get the job. Another special correspondent, TV star Jackie Gleason, whose long-lost father Hoover volunteered to find.
From the Gleason file. In 1956, information was received indicating that Jackie Gleason's father, Herbert Gleason, had disappeared, and Jackie Gleason had been unable to learn anything concerning his father or the reason for his disappearance.
The FBI went to work, and as they usually do, the FBI got their man, discovering the senior Gleason had died some time ago. The hunt for Herbert Gleason seems to be a clear abuse of public funds, but it's interesting to note that Hoover was so confident of his position and power that he bragged of the incident to his boss at the time, Attorney General Herbert Brownell. While speaking with the Attorney General on another matter today, wrote Hoover, I advised him that he might be interested to know that we had located the father of Jackie Gleason. I told him that we had contacted Gleason, and he was very happy with this news. While patting himself on the back, Hoover apparently neglected to tell the Attorney General that the elder Gleason had long been dead. J. Edgar Hoover got the chance to personally control a top-rated national primetime TV audience with that FBI show that John Wayne couldn't do. Running from 1965 to 1974, the FBI featured Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. as crime-busting agent Louis Erskine, an Ivy League G-man who always cracked his cases. And Hoover ran the show with all the authority of a network president. Hoover and his men not only selected which cases they wanted to be dramatized, they also reviewed all the scripts and storylines. And as John Wayne found out, Hoover was able to bar any writers or actors if their own FBI files contained any information that Hoover didn't like. So each week, millions of Americans got their impressions of the FBI spoon-fed to them just the way Hoover wanted. Illegal wiretaps, unwarranted surveillance, unlawful break-ins, and special favors were never mentioned. All we ever saw were clean-cut agents nailing their man week after week.
I think the best way to understand J. Edgar Hoover is to try to visualize his total obsession, his total love for the FBI. This was his creature. This was his child. This was his family. It was the only family he had. And he would protect its image at any cost.
That FBI TV show meant more than just image for Mr. Hoover. It also meant money in the bank. Not only did he insist on controlling the program, but Hoover also made the production company pay $75,000 for the rights to his book, Masters of Deceit, even though the book had nothing to do with the TV show. And incidentally, Mike, that book wasn't even written by Hoover. He had his agents do it. And the joke around the Bureau was that it was written by a real master of deceit who never even read it.
Thanks, Wendy. Of course, Hoover's power and control reached far beyond Hollywood. He would, in fact, insinuate himself into the very heart of one of the most sensitive and important political movements in American history, a place where he should never have been.
Next, Hoover's dirty war against one of the nation's most respected leaders.
If you have a cold and take Sudafed, there's something you should know. Contact Maximum Strength Tablets stop the sneezing and runny nose. Sudafed can't.
Gesundheit.
Until there's a cure, there's Contact.
This is delicious, Donnie. What do you call it?
It's new ragu fresh Italian pasta sauce.
So delicate. What's it called?
It's fresh Italian pasta sauce. The ragu uses twice the crushed tomatoes for a more fresh tomato taste.
New ragu fresh Italian pasta sauce.
This is Tropicana Pure Premium Orange Juice. No other major brand comes closer to this than this. Now this is Tropicana Pure Premium Home Style for those who like juicy bits of orange in their juice. So if you like the taste plus the feel of fresh squeezed, no one comes closer to this than this. Tropicana Pure Premium. Either way, you just can't pick a better juice.
This is Fox 31, Cable Channel 7.
These days, are you feeling boxed in? Are you wondering, where's your life going? Do you want to do something about it right now? Then pick up the phone, call this number right now. Because the U.S. Department of Labor predicts over 50,000 of all kinds of tractor-trailer jobs are opening annually. The nation's second largest employer is looking for people right now who can qualify for full and part-time driving jobs. By calling this number, you can learn how men and women train for these exciting professional truck driving careers. No experience is necessary, and you can train daily or weekends. But unless you call, National Tractor Trailer School. Call now. Learn how.
Although the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. was probably the most honored and respected black in American history, he was not without his enemies. And none was more vindictive than J. Edgar Hoover. Hoover saw King as a threat to the established social order, and thus a threat to Hoover himself. Even so, the vehemence of Hoover's attacks on King seemed somewhat out of proportion. Out of proportion or not, correspondent Thayer Walker has discovered that Hoover's assault on King is perhaps the most outrageous chapter of all in the secret files. Thayer?
There's no doubt about it at all, Mike. Hoover pulled out all the stops in his efforts to get King. At the time, Hoover's boss was Attorney General Robert Kennedy, and Hoover kept telling Kennedy that King's movement was infiltrated by communists. Finally, in September of 1963, Kennedy agreed to strictly limited wiretaps on King's activities. 3 taps were approved, one on King's Atlanta home, one on his office there, and one on his New York headquarters. That shred of legality was all Hoover needed. Disregarding Kennedy's limitations, Hoover soon had 14 more taps on King, and he was making plans to infiltrate King's movement with the few black agents the Bureau now had. He was also planning to use illegal break-ins to get even more compromising information. After Time magazine named King Man of the Year in 1962 and infuriated Hoover redoubled his efforts to smear and discredit him. These efforts took the form of an all-out surveillance of King and his movements from the secret files.
Martin Luther King Jr. is to be in San Francisco from May 28 to May 31, 1964. It was indicated that King and his party would probably stay at the Sheraton Palace Hotel. Electronic coverage should be afforded King during this current visit.
In FBI jargon, electronic coverage simply means bugging. It was not an isolated incident. Almost everywhere King traveled, the FBI followed with its electronic eyes and ears. Shamelessly using the prestige of the Bureau, agents intimidated hotel officials in city after city to set King up in pre-bugged accommodations. This file shows how it was done.
We learned that Martin Luther King is in Detroit at the Statler Hotel with an associate. They have rooms 1270 and 1272. Our agents are secure in room 1274.
What was Hoover trying to hear in those bugged hotel rooms? Basically, he was convinced King was having sexual relations with women when he traveled. And information like that would be excellent grist for Hoover's blatant blackmail mill. When, for example, King visited the Schroeder Hotel in Milwaukee, Hoover's agents cabled him that their eavesdropping would not be productive because local police have taken a room close to the suite of rooms engaged by King so that protection might be afforded. The Milwaukee agents apparently felt that because police were nearby, King would be too careful to engage in any sexual activities. In his own handwriting, the director fired back this rebuke.
I don't share the conjecture. King is a tomcat with obsessive, degenerate sexual urges.
Needless to say, the surveillance was carried out. How intensive were Hoover's efforts? David Garrow, Pulitzer Prize-winning author of the civil rights history, Bearing the Cross.
And I think it's important to really emphasize that the degree of this hotel room recording that the FBI directed against King reached far beyond anything that really anyone has been subjected to in American history with regard to government surveillance of people's private lives.
Former presidential candidate Jesse Jackson served on Dr. King's staff and reflected on the civil rights leader's feelings about the surveillance.
I think his basic position was that there's no defense against ambush and sabotage and corruption at the highest levels of government. He never succumbed to the lifestyle that fear creates.
And we are going to say to this nation and this world, we ain't going to let nobody turn us around.
As Hoover continued his smear campaign, he raised the ante. He became intent upon leaking his sexual intelligence on King to the press in hopes that the news stories it generated might ruin King. But no reputable journalist printed Hoover's material. One of those approached was columnist Jack Anderson.
The transcripts and reports of some of these incidents were made available to me, and were made available, I'm told, to other news people. In my own case, I didn't publish them. But the FBI made an undercover effort to discredit Martin Luther King.
Frustrated by its inability to rope in the news media, Hoover's FBI stooped to one of the shabbiest tricks in its history. A group of agents was authorized to put together a tape containing samples of what they felt was some of the most damaging recordings. The tape was sent anonymously to King's office, along with a letter which read in part, "Your end is approaching. King, there is only one thing left for you to do. You know what it is." The tape was opened by Dr. King's wife, Coretta.
They mailed them to Dr. King's wife, a willingness to try to destroy his home as a way of intimidating him or controlling his actions. Again, that was so illegal and so immoral.
In December 1964, King requested a meeting with Hoover in an effort to end their war. To his face at the meeting with King, Hoover congratulated him for winning the Nobel Peace Prize. But after the meeting, the director's pettiness became evident. He later boasted to friends, "I never addressed him as Reverend or Doctor." By that time, Lyndon Johnson had become president, and he issued an executive order prohibiting wiretaps for any reason except national security. But Hoover kept right on bugging. In addition to evidence of illicit sex, Hoover wanted desperately to prove the King's movement was manipulated by communists. The tapes of those hotel room buggings have been ordered sealed by the courts until the year 2025. But we have been able to unearth the transcripts of certain FBI wiretaps on phone calls between King and a top advisor, New York lawyer Stanley Levison. The agency was certain that Levison was King's link to the Communist Party. But in all the transcripts, we found no reference to communism whatsoever. And even after his assassination in 1968, Hoover continued his effort to smear King. It involved Jack Anderson.
And they gave me the name of a dentist in Los Angeles whose wife they claimed Martin Luther King had been squiring. And they told me that the evidence indicated that this dentist had killed Martin Luther King in revenge. Oh, the wife knew Martin Luther King. The wife may even have been friendly with Martin Luther King. But the story was a fabrication. And they tried to plant that story.
The way Hoover got Bobby Kennedy to approve those King wiretaps is a classic example of how he used his secret files for blackmail. When Bobby first balked, Hoover threatened to make public an explosive affair between Jack Kennedy and a suspected Nazi spy. Bobby quickly agreed to the bugging. Mike?
Thank you, Thayer. And that John F. Kennedy file is one that we'll be disclosing in detail later tonight.
Next, John Lennon and the FBI, Hoover's desperate battle to put the rock star behind bars.
This is Fox 31, Cable Channel 7.
It's important to me to be in charge of my own time, to be responsible in meeting my own schedule. America is a land of opportunity. And if you're willing to train, you might just qualify for one of this country's most important jobs. Find out how you can train to become one of us, the men and women who drive tractor trailers, bringing home the goods and keeping America on the right road. If you've got what it takes, then here's the place that'll give you what you need. The chance to prove it. National Tractor Trailer School. Call now. Learn how.
Country Sweet Chicken and Ribs are the wings of Rochester with their famous mild and hot barbecue sauces, plum chicken dinners, mouth-watering rib dinners, jumbo shrimp dinners. Open 7 days a week for lunch, dinner, or late-night snacks. Phone ahead. From Wing and Mac snacks, wing dinners, single and double wing orders, to 200-piece party packs. The best is yours at Country Sweet Chicken and Ribs, 640 Lake Avenue, 1691 Mount Hope Avenue, and 515 Monroe Avenue.
Who done it?
You're under oath.
Who killed the man for his money?
I'm curious, Della.
Who done it?
Personally, I suspect me.
Who's covering up?
Why the deception?
And what does all the evidence point to?
Della Street.
His closest friend, his toughest case.
We do not have one concrete bit of evidence on Della's behalf.
Who done it?
Perry Mason returns Tuesday at 8 on Fox 31, Cable 7.
As we have seen since the earliest days of Elvis Presley, J. Edgar Hoover displayed an almost paranoid hatred toward rock and roll music and its biggest stars.
From the files. To Director, FBI. Confidential, classified. Subject, James Marshall Hendricks, a.k.a. Jimi Hendrix. June 3, 1969. Inquiry has determined that subject was arrested on May 2, 1961, on the charge of taking a motor vehicle without permission. Cass Elliott, summary. Captioned individual, also known as Mama Cass, was arrested and charged with the stealing of 2 blankets and 2 keys from the Embassy Hotel, Kensington, England. She allegedly has smoked marijuana and reportedly is associated with drug addicts and individuals opposed to the president's Vietnam policy. Urgent to Director. Rock concert is to be held featuring Janis Joplin. Unconfirmed reports threaten possible violence. Bureau agents on scene.
But as correspondent Wendy Gordon has learned, outside of Elvis, no rocker came under as much FBI surveillance as the one-time Beatle, John Lennon.
Mike, as Hoover approached the twilight of his career and of his life, the world seemed to be changing a bit too fast for him. New attitudes, new lifestyles were coming to the forefront, and the director didn't like it one bit. John Lennon became a symbol to Hoover of everything he feared and despised in this new youth-oriented America. The new permissiveness of the day was especially galling to Hoover, and when Lennon's 1969 album Two Virgins appeared, with a nude cover photo of John and his wife Yoko Ono, Hoover was incensed. Acting in his self-imposed role as guardian of the nation's morals, Hoover asked the Justice Department to pin an obscenity rap on Lennon. The Justice Department, however, knew there was no way to make such a charge stick, and the best the FBI could do was put the album in Lennon's file. The bulldogish Mr. Hoover, however, never gave up very easily. With the nation entering the 1970s, student protest against the Vietnam War was growing increasingly militant. Lennon's protest songs became a rallying point for young demonstrators, and Hoover became desperate to find some legal grounds to get the singer. The secret files exposed that desperation.
Cable, from the director of the FBI's Los Angeles office. While Lennon has shown no propensity to become involved in violent anti-war demonstrations, remain alert for any information of such activity on his part.
Of course, that's all it took for the Bureau to begin covering Lennon the way the Wall Street Journal covers the stock exchange. When John and Yoko moved to New York in 1971, the official surveillance began, and agents followed their every move. Hoover had such a hatred for Lennon that he didn't even want to blackmail him. He just wanted to see him in jail. John Wiener, Lennon's biographer in the book Come Together, says that Hoover hounded the singer incessantly.
He thought he was being wiretapped. He knew that there were strange men coming to his house to fix the phones a little too often. I think the FBI was intentionally trying to act sinister and menacing, to make him feel paranoid, to make him scared, to make him feel worried.
Actually, the paranoia seemed to be more Hoover's than Lennon's. Like a man possessed, he grabbed almost wildly for any way to bag his elusive quarry. One unlikely opportunity came when British citizen Lennon ran afoul of the Immigration Service, which charged that because of a drug conviction back home, Lennon had to be deported. It was not really an FBI matter, but Hoover jumped in with both feet. Lennon claimed that the English drug charge was a frame-up, and he further pleaded that deportation would break up his family. Yoko had a daughter by a previous marriage, and John claimed that Yoko's ex-husband had abducted the young girl. He said that if he and Yoko were deported, it would hamper their search for her. The feds didn't believe the story for a minute, and Hoover added this report to his Lennon file.
The INS believes the Lennons may be party to keeping the child hidden. as a tool of delaying deportation.
The whole mess came to naught when the INS finally ruled it had no legal case, but the vindictive Mr. Hoover pressed on and began to make mistakes. At one point, he issued a bulletin on Lennon using the photograph of a different musician. And when Lennon once made a brief trip to London, Deputy Attorney General Richard Kleindienst fired off a memo to the INS asking if there was any way to keep Lennon out for good. There was just one problem. Not only had Lennon already returned, but he was making a live appearance on the Mike Douglas TV show on that same day. By the election year of 1972, 18-year-olds were able to vote, and Republican officials were worried that as a leader of the youth protest movement, Lennon might try to disrupt the renomination of Nixon at the Miami convention. With his pal Richard Nixon at risk, and still without hard facts in his files, Hoover began to grasp at straws.
From the files, careful attention should be given to reports that Lennon is a heavy narcotics user, and any information in this regard should be furnished to narcotics authorities and immediately furnished to the Bureau.
And another file entry.
Subject, John Winston Lennon. Very real possibility exists that the subject might engage in activities leading toward disruption of the Republican National Convention. For this reason, New York promptly initiate efforts to locate subject and remain aware of his activities and movements.
John Lennon hoped to be a threat to the re-election of Richard Nixon, but what the FBI was doing here was confusing a challenge to Richard Nixon with a threat to the national security, and that's the basic problem of the FBI in this era.
Less than a year after that convention, Hoover would be dead, and to his last days, one of his greatest disappointments was that he could never nail John Lennon. Mike?
Thanks, Wendy. The real irony of the Lennon case is that in his prime, Hoover would have taken a measured, organized approach to his pursuit of Lennon, possibly concentrating on the singer's alleged financing of violent radical groups, including the Irish Republican Army. But the FBI files tell the John Lennon story as a missed opportunity for the aging director.
Next, Hoover at the White House. Presidential secrets.
My headaches are full-grown, adult-sized bangaroos, so I bang them back with Bear. It's strong. It's not an aspirin substitute. It's made for adults, just like you and me.
For adult-sized pain, Bayer, the wonder drug that works wonders.
Facing the world with a cold sore can be very embarrassing. So from the first tingle, I use Campho-Phenique Cold Sore Gel. It goes to work instantly on my cold sore. Campho-Phenique Cold Sore Gel helps me face the world.
He was the luckiest flyer alive. Then...
I'm dead. That's right.
Now he's got one more mission to accomplish.
They hear you inside their own minds, as if it were their thoughts.
Give him a chance, Al!
Okay, kid, you got a chance. Don't screw it up.
I'm gonna like this job.
Richard Dreyfuss, Holly Hunter, John Goodman. From director Steven Spielberg. Always rated PG. Starts Friday, December 22nd at theaters everywhere.
Uncle Charlie hasn't thought about his dentures all day, because he thought about Orifix this morning.
Orifix-em. That'll fix 'em.
Orifix has extra hold to hold dentures tight day and night. Orifix-em. That'll fix 'em.
When Ocean Spray adds sweet, sunny oranges to tangy cranberries, something cool and refreshing happens to sandwiches. Wow! Cran Fruit brand sauces add a cool, refreshing zing to everything.
Nobody knows quite when Grandpa Time dreams up the stories he tells to kids every night, but most people think it's sometime in the wee hours. Because when morning comes around, he's got another job to do.
Good morning, sleepyhead. It's time to wake up.
Grandpa Time. He tells stories at night, and he's the best way ever to wake up in the morning.
Georgetown, Washington, D.C. This is the home on fashionable 30th Place where J. Edgar Hoover lived during most of his administration. The only other regular resident was a live-in maid whose quarters were in the basement. But that doesn't mean that Hoover was without plenty of help. FBI employees working on government time built the front portico to the home and constructed a fish pond in the backyard. and gave the director just about any other home improvements he desired. Clearly, all of this represented a misuse of public funds. So, how did Hoover explain all these diversions of government money for his own benefit? Simple. He didn't. He didn't have to because nobody asked him to. Most likely, nobody dared ask him to. Hoover's power, you see, didn't end inside his own organization. It ran straight down Pennsylvania Avenue from his house to the White House. 8 presidents, starting with Calvin Coolidge and ending with Richard Nixon, were Hoover's nominal bosses. Unlike other federal officials, Hoover operated inside a web of secrecy, and any president was shown only what Hoover wanted him to see. While even Hoover didn't dare to blackmail prominent political leaders as blatantly as he did Martin Luther King, he subtly let them know that there was damaging material in his files.
He would call up a politician as his friend, and he would say, "Congressman," he said, "your enemies are spreading this terrible story about you. And I just wanted to alert you and to let you know that we're going to do what we can to stop it," thereby letting the congressman know that the FBI knew all about this embarrassing episode in the man's past.
During World War II, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt was without question the most revered man in America, the man that millions looked up to as the savior of the free world. But even FDR and his family were not off limits to Hoover and his files. And the director believed he really hit pay dirt when he dug up rumors that the First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt, was having a secret love affair with a young soldier named Joseph Lash. The files state that Mrs. Roosevelt and Lash engaged in sexual intercourse during their stay in a hotel room. Now, not daring to risk a frontal assault on Eleanor, Hoover conspired with Army intelligence brass to bug Lash's phone calls and open the letters he sent to her. The military would then turn everything it learned over to Hoover. The files also contain a report stating that when President Roosevelt learned of the investigation, there was a terrific fight between the President and Mrs. Roosevelt. It said that FDR reacted by ordering each military officer who knew about the case to be immediately relieved of his duties and sent to the South Pacific for action against the Japs until they were killed. Joseph Lash survived the war, and years later he would write the bestseller Eleanor and Franklin. The rigors of the war took an increasing toll on President Roosevelt. His health began to steadily decline, but the White House believed that for reasons of security and morale, FDR's medical condition should become a closely guarded secret. But of course, nothing remained a secret from Mr. Hoover for very long. And this report showed up in his file stating that the president definitely has a serious heart disease. And following his technique of gentle blackmail, Hoover made sure that the president knew he had the information. In a memo to FDR's press secretary, Steve Early, marked personal and confidential, Hoover slyly stated,
"I thought you would like to have this at hand so that you might know what the rumor mongers are circulating. With best regards, sincerely, Edgar."
Hundreds of FBI agents were engaged in investigating the charges against all those who had been accused.
Harry Truman and J. Edgar Hoover belonged to a mutual detestation society. But because of Hoover's immense popularity at the time, Truman couldn't take the political risk of firing him. And Hoover knew it full well. This knowledge gave Hoover a pretty free hand in his operations during the Truman administration. In a memo to the FBI's number 2 man, Clyde Tolson, from number 3 man, L.B. Nichols, an undisclosed but apparently high-level source is quoted as saying that Truman has never seriously given any consideration to removing the director and would not do so primarily because he fears public reaction. The source added that Truman is not a warm friend of the director's. The last was a magnificent understatement. In private, Truman referred to Hoover as that horse's ass and called the Bureau Hoover's goddamn Gestapo. With the next president, Hoover could sing "I Like Ike" and really mean it. Why not? Dwight Eisenhower was a good Republican, and Hoover had an explicit file on him filled with sexual rumors. Just the kind of material Hoover loved to exploit. The chief allegation concerned Ike's wartime affair with his official driver, Kay Summersby. Among Hoover's Eisenhower files are reports that Ike once asked other Army brass about the effects on his career if he divorced his longtime wife, Mamie. Stories about Kay Summersby continued to be collected by Hoover throughout Eisenhower's presidency. We dug up this file entry from late in Ike's first term.
Kay Summersby, a former WAC staff officer assigned to President Eisenhower in Europe, has been staying at the Shoreham Hotel for the last 30 to 45 days under an assumed name.
Washington's Shoreham Hotel is just a couple of miles from the White House, and for Hoover, the implication was clear.
I ask the American people for a mandate to begin.
During the Eisenhower years, a senator named Lyndon Baines Johnson was Hoover's neighbor on 30th Place, and they became close friends. After he became president, Hoover shared much of the material in his files with Johnson, and it's said that LBJ especially liked reading about the sexual adventures of his political associates. What Lyndon didn't know is that Hoover had files just as revealing on LBJ himself.
From the files, October 18, 1956. This matter involves alleged irregularities in absentee voting and the purchase of poll taxes in Laredo, Texas.
By manipulating absentee ballots, Johnson could easily assure that his own supporters would be elected to key positions, and there wasn't much that local authorities could do about it. And when a Texas newspaper joined with CBS News in trying to link then Vice President Johnson to a financial scandal involving his pal Billy Saul Estes, the files show that Johnson asked Hoover to help him get off the hook. In a classified memo to all of his top aides, Hoover said he promised Johnson that he would get started on it right away. After all, that's what friends are for. But what LBJ didn't know about is Hoover's file concerning another of Johnson's buddies, influence peddler Bobby Baker. Baker would use this Maryland motel to bring together congressmen and call girls. This FBI file makes a clear mention of an appearance there by Lyndon Johnson and also attended by numerous prominent personages. In 1969, when Nixon succeeded Johnson in the White House, Lyndon reportedly told Nixon how valuable Hoover's private services could be. Of course, this is something that Nixon already knew. He and Hoover had been friends since 1950, despite Nixon's rejection as an FBI candidate. But as Nixon's term in office went on, Hoover was becoming increasingly unpopular, and Nixon was having troubles of his own. Finally, Nixon felt that Hoover represented a threat to his administration. Now, in an effort to persuade Hoover to quietly go away, Nixon told the director that if he resigned, Nixon would make it a state occasion filled with tributes to Hoover's service to America. Hoover wouldn't even consider it. Standing eyeball to eyeball with his president, Hoover growled, "The tougher the attacks get, the tougher I get." By the time the meeting was over, Hoover not only still had his job, he got a presidential promise of more money for the FBI.
Next, Kennedy men, Kennedy mistresses, Kennedy mob ties.
Put the power of an upright in the palm of your hand with the Royal Dirt Devil. It has a revolving brush, and it can handle all kinds of dirt. Pick up the handheld vac that really picks up. Dirt Devil by Royal.
When arthritis specialists are concerned about aspirin irritation, this is the brand they recommend most. Not Bayer, Ecotrin, with the orange safety coat to help protect your stomach. The more aspirin you take, the more you need the right brand. That's Ecotrin, and that's the truth.
What's wrong, Doug?
Mr. Kayam, I hate shaving.
You're using the wrong equipment. Try this Remington Microscreen. The Microscreen shaves as close as a blade, or your money back. It has two thin, flexible screens. The first shaves incredibly close. The second even closer.
Smooth. Now I know why you bought the company.
The Remington Microscreen shaves as close as a blade, or your money back. No other shaver makes that promise. And the Lady Remington, the gift with the money-back guarantee.
Come on, join the fun. Call 1-900-226-3333. The National Party Connection.
Well, I'm blonde hair, blue eyes.
Are you good looking?
I think so.
You never know who you'll end up talking to. Call 1-900-226-3333 now.
How about
it's live.
7?
Oh, terrific. I'll wear my new miniskirt. You'll love it.
That sounds terrific. I can't wait to meet you.
What are you waiting for? Call the National Party Connection now.
I called. Why don't you?
Hi, folks. This is John from Gabrielli Ford. And during the holiday season, it's a time of giving, and we're trying to do our part here at Gabrielli Ford like this. 1990 Escort pony with cloth seat trim, overdrive transmission for $149 down, $149 a month. Or this 1990 F-150 S-Series with rear anti-lock brakes, overdrive transmission, and all-season tires for $219 down, $219 a month. So what do? You pick up the phone, you dial 293-3100, or better yet, come on down.
If a family name was ever more synonymous with power and wealth and influence than that of Kennedy, it would be awfully difficult to find. And since J. Edgar Hoover was attracted to those qualities like a bee to honey, it comes as no surprise that the Kennedys were probably the most compelling target he ever pursued. Correspondent Thayer Walker has the story.
For over 30 years, J. Edgar Hoover was digging into the lives of the Kennedys. A lifetime obsession was trying to gain leverage over the nation's most powerful family. Hoover's early leverage came from his reports on the shady past of the family patriarch, Joe Kennedy. Joe first became a millionaire working as a bootlegger during Prohibition in association with mafia boss Frank Costello. He later legalized his whiskey business, was named chairman of the powerful Securities and Exchange Commission by President Roosevelt, and was later appointed ambassador to England. But there isn't much doubt that he maintained his ties with the underworld throughout most of his life, and there's no doubt at all that Hoover knew about it. From the secret files, just after the presidential election of 1960.
Numerous sources report that before the last presidential election, Joseph Kennedy, father of President John F. Kennedy, had been visited by many gangsters with gambling interests, and a deal was made, which resulted in obtaining a lucrative gaming establishment.
Actually, Hoover's files are filled with potentially embarrassing tidbits about Joe Kennedy and his sons. But the unspoken threat of blackmail made the elder Kennedy careful to praise Hoover publicly whenever he had the opportunity. C. David Heyman, author of the best-selling book A Woman Named Jackie, told us more about the unlikely relationship between Hoover and Joe Kennedy.
As a matter of fact, the FBI files reveal in no uncertain terms that Joe Kennedy, the father of Jack, was an FBI informant. He and Hoover were quite friendly. I mean, he, as the FBI files reveal, was providing them with names of people to investigate.
But young Jack Kennedy was Hoover's special target. As a congressman, senator, and as president, Jack represented a one-man witch hunt for Hoover and his agents, who tapped his phones, bugged his hotel rooms, and often followed the scores of women with whom Jack had love affairs. And as we'll hear in a few minutes, they were successful in digging up 2 blackmail bombshells concerning Jack's early romances. Hoover's sex watch on John Kennedy also was a crime watch. Like father, like son, the director must have thought as he compiled this file. It deals with the subject, Senator John F. Kennedy, and it raises questions about Kennedy's ties to crime figures, including gambling czar Meyer Lansky. Reports linking Kennedy with the mafia mushroomed after his affair with Los Angeles party girl Judith Campbell. At the same time she was seeing the president, Campbell was dating Chicago hood Sam Giancana. One Hoover file entry states flat out that Campbell had an affair with President Kennedy. Kennedy's weakness for women not only got him in jeopardy with the FBI, but also with the mafia, which was also looking for some power over a president. Hoover's files report that while Kennedy was campaigning, quote, hoodlums are financially supporting and actively endeavoring to secure the nomination of Kennedy for the presidency.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
After Kennedy was elected, Hoover's agents realized that a good way to keep tabs on Kennedy's love life was to keep an eye on his brother-in-law, actor Peter Lawford. Lawford was Hoover's link between Hollywood and Washington. He was already well known to the FBI, and he had a long file of his own. One report links Lawford to the interstate transportation of women for immoral purposes, a federal crime. And this file shows Lawford involved in a sex-for-hire case.
From the secret files, a group of high-priced call girls went to Las Vegas to be available during conventions and the making of motion pictures. They worked as prostitutes, having among their customers Peter Lawford.
And it is in the Lawford file that the agents first discovered a romantic connection between Jack Kennedy and Marilyn Monroe.
Report from an informant. Information concerning sex parties which took place at the Hotel Carlyle in New York City and at which a number of persons participated at different times. Among those mentioned were the following individuals: Robert F. Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, Peter Lawford, Marilyn Monroe.
It was not the first time Jack Kennedy had been linked romantically to Hollywood stars. In his 20s, he had had a romance with Gene Tierney, and later relationships included Angie Dickinson and even Jane Mansfield. How did Kennedy find out that Hoover was spying on his affairs? Robert Slatzer was Marilyn Monroe's lifelong confidant.
She revealed to the president for the first time that she felt that she had been followed. And then he sort of began to second guess a few things, and he said it might be Edgar and the FBI.
It soon became clear to Kennedy that the Monroe affair was becoming a danger to his presidency. In addition to all those prying eyes, much of the time Marilyn was unbalanced and drugged, a loose cannon telling friends she hoped Jack would soon divorce his wife, Jackie, so that she could become the First Lady. Even the general public was starting to become aware of the relationship between Jack and Marilyn, especially after Marilyn turned the singing of Happy Birthday into an erotic ballad at a presidential birthday party in Madison Square Garden.
Happy birthday, Mr. President. Happy birthday to you.
For Jack, the situation became untenable. He asked brother Bobby to tell Marilyn that the affair was over. Bobby did his duty and promptly began an affair of his own with the Hollywood sex goddess.
From the secret files, Robert Kennedy was deeply involved emotionally with Marilyn Monroe and had repeatedly promised to divorce his wife to marry Marilyn. Eventually, Marilyn realized that Bobby had no intention of marrying her.
Reports contend that Marilyn fell into a deep depression when she realized that the affair with Bobby was hopeless, and that this depression contributed to her mysterious death in 1962. In fairness to Hoover, it should be noted that the surveillance of the Kennedy brothers and Marilyn may have been prompted by more than just bedroom blackmail. Agents feared the brothers may have told Marilyn some government secrets, and that in her drugged and depressed condition, she could well have been a security risk. We also know, Mike, that shortly after Marilyn's death, Hoover's agents descended on her home, trying to erase evidence of her affairs with the Kennedys.
Thanks, Thayer. If the order to remove any evidence from Marilyn Monroe's apartment came from Robert Kennedy, it would have been one of the few orders from the Attorney General that Hoover could obey with pleasure. Not only would it make his boss happy, but he would be able to get more sensitive information for his own secret files.
Next, John F. Kennedy's darkest secrets, romances that could have toppled the president.
Think of your hands and think of a name. For years, it's healed and restored rough, dry skin. Now there's something more. Announcing new improved Vaseline Intensive Care, an even better formula with more healing ingredients. It heals rough, dry skin fast. So when you think of your hands, think of our name. New improved Vaseline Intensive Care Lotion, now with even more healing ingredients.
What's a good demonstration of how powerful a vacuum is? How about paper clips, jelly beans, quarters, marbles, 3/4-inch nuts, 3/4-inch bolts, 3/4-inch nuts and bolts. What vacuum has this much power and a hose that lets you clean from floor to ceiling? The Regina Housekeeper Plus. Oh, the Housekeeper Plus also picks up dirt.
I know what you like, you can't fake it.
Tyson breast patties.
I know the play before you make it.
And microwave sandwiches, bun and all.
We're just family, you and young Tyson. Feeding you is good as good can be.
For your family, we make our patties from only the finest Tyson chicken breast.
Tyson's feeding you like family. Tyson's feeding you.
There's a foil so strong. When it comes to cooking, it really cleans up. Nothing works like Reynolds Wrap.
Tylenol or Ecotrin?
Guess which one arthritis specialists choose? Surprised? It's Ecotrin, the aspirin with the orange safety coat to help protect your stomach. The arthritis specialist choice over Tylenol. That's Ecotrin, and that's the truth.
2 more episodes we'll reveal tonight from Hoover's Secret Files concern a pair of John Kennedy romances that, if known during his lifetime, might have altered the course of American history. One involves possible wartime spying, and the other tells of an affair that might have cost Kennedy his marriage or even the White House. First, let's meet Inga. Inga Arvad was 28 years old in 1941, a talented, successful reporter wrapped in a willowy blonde package of cool Scandinavian beauty. As a Danish citizen, Inga was assigned to cover pre-war Berlin, and her brains and beauty made her irresistible to the top echelons of Nazi brass. So much so, in fact, that she was once offered a key public relations job for the Third Reich. Inga hobnobbed with the likes of Hermann Goering and Joseph Goebbels and even the Fuhrer himself, Adolf Hitler. Any woman who could get so close to Hitler was bound to attract J. Edgar Hoover's attention, and Inga Arvad was no exception. Even before the war, Hoover knew about Inga, and this secret FBI file reports that she was described by Hitler as a perfect Nordic beauty. In 1941, Inga came to Washington as a newspaper reporter. She lived in this apartment on 16th Street with her husband, a European mystery man who was seldom seen. It was then that Hoover began to keep a close eye on her, and for entirely different reasons, so did a young Navy ensign named John Fitzgerald Kennedy, who had met Inga through his sister, Kathleen. Inga's FBI file begins with a memorandum to Hoover reporting on a rumor that Inga Arvad, local newspaper reporter and Danish citizen, is a German spy. Inga Arvad was about to become the subject of an all-out FBI investigation. January 21st, 1942, a report is issued entitled Espionage, Internal Security. The document ends with an order to institute immediate appropriate physical surveillance. Inga Arvad was now officially under investigation for espionage, and the Bureau felt it had a very strong case. A week later, a message to Hoover from the special agent in charge of the Washington field office says, he believes the Arvad case has got more possibilities than anything I have seen in a long time. Apparently, young Ensign Kennedy also felt that Inga had some pretty good possibilities, and they began to see each other regularly. Their affair was heating up about the same time that the FBI began its surveillance of Inga. And so when FBI agents were tailing her, they were coincidentally beginning a file on John Kennedy's love affairs. At least they thought they were. A February 1942 report shows that the agents had to ask Navy brass for a picture of Kennedy to be sure they had the right man. With Hoover's secret files now documenting an affair between the son of a former ambassador and a possible Nazi spy, the director held lightning in his hand. And when Kennedy was running for president some 20 years later, Hoover could have unleashed that lightning with a blast that might have well cost JFK the White House. But, as we have seen before, Hoover's style was to hang on to such information until the time it could do him the most good. Throughout 1942, FBI agents tailed Inga, sending minutely detailed reports back to Hoover. They checked her banking habits, her car registration, and even the fact that on a New York to Washington train ride, she would be occupying car 249 lower berth. Joe Kennedy learned of the affair and was just as aware as Hoover of the damage potential. He went to work in an attempt to break up the romance. Author C. David Heyman told us the affair continued in spite of their efforts.
The only thing that they succeeded in doing was getting John F. Kennedy transferred from Naval Intelligence to the shipyards in Charleston, South Carolina. And there he was, again, seeing Inga Arvad. She would visit him from Washington weekends.
This travel report to Hoover had Inga leaving Washington, D.C. via the Atlantic coastline at 7:05 p.m. Destination, Charleston, South Carolina. Agents were instructed to maintain surveillance 24 hours and to be very discreet. Inga also exercised discretion, traveling under the alias of Barbara White. It would take more than a 13-and-a-half-hour train ride to keep Inga from Jack. Reunited in Charleston, the couple checked into the Fort Sumter Hotel where Inga was given a room set up in advance for eavesdropping by agents of the FBI. No spy talk was heard, but a detailed report was sent back to Hoover indicating the subject and Kennedy engaged in sexual intercourse on numerous occasions. The FBI also tapped her telephone line. With Kennedy in Charleston and Inga in Washington, agents recorded their conversations. Transcripts were sent to Hoover, including this private chat directly from the secret files.
Jack questions Inga. Did you say, name deleted, was better dressed than I was? Did you say I should go to his tailor?
Oh, no, I said nothing of the sort. I asked if you had the same tailor. He had such a nice suit on one day.
He says that's not quite right.
He said you do not have the same tailor. That's no reflection on your clothes, darling. You look best without anything.
I heard you had a big orgy up in New York.
I'll tell you about it. I'll tell you about it for a whole weekend if you'd like to hear about it.
There are reports that the story of this affair with a possible Nazi spy followed John Fitzgerald Kennedy even into the White House some 2 decades later. During a speech in 1963, an FBI agent was present. C. David Heyman tells the rest of the story.
As Kennedy was returning to his place, this FBI agent whispered, "How's Inga Arvad?" which, really upset Kennedy, because he whispered back, "You son of a bitch."
This file also comes from the director's office, and it tells a darker, more disturbing story of John Kennedy's romantic life. It reveals a charge that Kennedy's storybook wedding to Jacqueline Bouvier may have actually been the second time JFK walked down the aisle. This is her home, that gilded refuge for the very rich known as the Florida Gold Coast. The woman is now 73, and it's always somehow shocking to consider that Kennedy himself would now be 72 years old. 50 years ago, the woman was a beauty, and press reports of the day mention an open romance with Kennedy well before Jack's 1953 marriage to Jackie. She's been photographed at Gold Coast parties, has confirmed that she knew the Kennedy family for years and that she knew John Kennedy particularly well. Because it happened so long ago and far away, and out of respect for the woman's privacy, we will not reveal her name. But J. Edgar Hoover knew it, and his official and confidential files show that he used that information for some of his gentle blackmail.
November 22, 1961. Memorandum for personal files. The Attorney General, Robert F. Kennedy, called, and while talking to him, I asked him if he had seen this thing being circulated about the first marriage of the president.
It was just Hoover's subtle way of letting Kennedy know that he had the information in his files. Hoover ended the report by noting, "The Attorney General expressed appreciation for my concern." I stated, I just wanted him to be alert to this. If nothing else, Bobby was definitely alert to the little game Hoover was playing. Hoover smelled blood and had his agents keep digging. He came up with more information in, of all places, the Library of Congress. Agents found a book there written by a relative of the woman in question, outlining the family's genealogy, their family tree.
The book says the woman was married and divorced twice, and then she married her third, John F. Kennedy, son of Ambassador Joseph P. Kennedy, one-time ambassador to England. There were no children of the second or third marriages.
The information was sent directly to Hoover. Another entry from Hoover's file states, a later report gives the alleged time of the marriage as having occurred when Kennedy was 22 years of age. Kennedy's politically powerful father is not mentioned by name in Hoover's file on the alleged marriage, but his fine hand seems evident. Hoover's reports say the marriage ended when a Reno divorce was granted in 1948. But for an unknown reason, the divorce decree was invalidated. We've learned that Joe Kennedy must have then gone to work on the matter, possibly attempting to exert his influence on 2 successive governors of New Jersey, the woman's home state. First, the file reveals an unsuccessful attempt was made to get a divorce in New Jersey when Governor Alfred Driscoll was in office. Kennedy was reported to have better luck with the next governor, Democrat Robert Minor. Hoover's file states that JFK is alleged to have gotten a sealed divorce early in the Minor administration in 1953. And the Hoover files even implicate Kennedy intimate Richard Cardinal Cushing.
From the secret file, Archbishop Cushing of Boston applied to the papal court in 1951 for an annulment, which was granted in 1953.
That's the same year Jack married Jackie, and it was Cardinal Cushing who officiated at the very public ceremonies. There are allegations that Kennedy intimates are part of a cover-up of the reported wedding. The Kennedy White House would never do more than issue a flat denial that Jack had ever been married to anyone except Jackie. And the woman in Florida also has denied that the marriage ever happened. But she has never explained why a supposedly accurate and politically unbiased family history would contain such a report.
Did the FBI keep files on you or someone you know? Next, how to find out.
This is Fox 31, Cable Channel 7.
It's important to me to be in charge of my own time, to be responsible in meeting my own schedule. America is a land of opportunity. And if you're willing to train, you might just qualify for one of this country's most important jobs. Find out how you can train to become one of us, the men and women who drive tractor trailers, bringing home the goods and keeping America on the right road. If you've got what it takes, then here's the place that'll give you what you need. The chance to prove it. National Tractor Trailer School. Call now. Learn how.
Help for the holidays is a specialty at Dan's with creative ideas for every skill. No other store has more things to make more things than Dan's Crafts and Things, Empire Boulevard, Irondequoit.
Rochester, it takes just a fraction of our time and money to help our favorite causes. Thousands of people in our community are striving to give 5. Volunteer 5 hours a week and give 5% of your income to the causes you care about. Be a fiver and give 5 for Greater Rochester. For more information, call 716-454-1264.
First, they met by accident.
You work in the city?
No, I'm married.
I'm married too.
Then, they met by choice.
You look great.
Now, they meet by desire.
Please, just could I see you?
I'm gonna go see him.
I don't understand. Why are you doing this?
I have to go now.
That's the
Academy Award winners Robert De Niro and Meryl Streep, together in a sizzling romance, falling in love.
Wednesday at 8 on Fox 31, Cable 7.
It is with a profound sense of personal loss that I learned of the death of J. Edgar Hoover. This truly remarkable man has served his country for 48 years under 8 presidents as director of the FBI with unparalleled devotion and ability and dedication.
It was May 2nd, 1972. Hoover died in bed, the victim of a heart attack at age 77. An ironically quiet end for a man involved for decades in turmoil and violence. Under subsequent directors who faced increasing public pressure for ethics in government, many of the Hoover-era abuses have now been eliminated. Wendy?
They have indeed, Mike, but the ones we've documented tonight tell only part of the story. As we've seen, there was so much information packed into those files that we had to be highly selective. If we had 10 times as much time, we still couldn't tell you everything. Thayer?
Another reason we couldn't say everything, Wendy, is that immediately after Hoover's death, loyal aides went through his office, and they destroyed the contents of more than 35 file cabinets, filled with reports that will never be seen. What we did find, however, was enough to clearly demonstrate the harm that can result when the checks and balances built into our system are ignored or evaded.
Thanks, Thayer. Wendy? As I mentioned earlier, uncounted millions of names remain in the FBI files. Now, if you think there's one on you or someone you know, here's how you can get it. Send a letter to Federal Bureau of Investigation, Freedom of Information and Privacy Act section, 9th and Pennsylvania Avenue, Northwest, Washington, D.C., 20578. This letter should include the statement, under the Freedom of Information and Privacy Act, I would like to request any and all information pertaining to myself in the FBI files. Your letter should include personal information such as your Social Security number, and it must be signed and notarized. It's the Freedom of Information Act that makes it all possible. In fact, it's that same law that made this entire program possible tonight. The irony is that the abuses by Hoover were among the main reasons that this law was passed, and that perhaps is one of the few positive legacies of the secret files of J. Edgar Hoover. I'm Mike Connors. Good night.
Buy any original classic model contour chair, and I, Art Linkletter, will send you your choice of a fabulous 19-inch Panasonic color TV, microwave oven,
or VCR. But don't buy a contour chair for one of these.
Get one because it's the most restful, healthful chair you ever relaxed in. Contour chairs help to relieve low back pain, poor venous blood circulation in your legs, edema, and swelling of the legs.
Call toll-free and get full details on our fabulous offer.
I chose the Panasonic Color TV.
I took the VCR.
I got the microwave.
Hello. I'd like to have your catalog and certificate mailed to me free.
Certainly, sir.
See how easy it is? Call for your free catalog and certificate right away.
Call 1-800-252-0900. That's 1-800-252-0900. In Canada, call 1-800-387-8034. 387-8034.
Come on, do it. Call the newest party line in the country. Call the line that has everyone talking. Pick up the phone. Call 1-900-226-4444. Do it. Call now and meet someone special. There's a party going on, so join in. Call 1-900-226-4444. It's live and it's fun, so go ahead. Do it. Call now.
The Rochester Eye and Human Parts Bank needs donations. Organ donation is a choice you make to give someone else a better life. You can help by signing an organ donor pledge card. It's a personal decision. Discuss it with your family. Most religions approve of or encourage organ donation. It costs you nothing, and the need is far greater than the supply. So make the choice to help. Call the Rochester Eye and Human Parts Bank today for a brochure. 546-5250.
Mamas like you make my job so easy when you don't tell your children just how deadly crack is. But my baby's too young, you say. Yeah, and I'm hooking them younger every day. But they don't have the money, you say. Huh. Once my customers get hooked on crack, they lie, cheat, and steal to get more. So thanks for not telling Junior about guys like me. I just love getting first crack at 'em.
We poured this wet cement and asked some unsuspecting victims to guard it.
Watch out, watch out, watch out!
Uh-oh.
Sunday at 8:30 on Fox 31.
dừng ở chậu anh.
I can't breathe.
Kiếm không được cũng nghỉ. Chúng ta đi. No, thank you.
Okay.
I'll have an ice cream.
Why don't you stay on your diet?
I'm always hungry. One scoop.
One scoop.
Delta 1 requesting DMV wants and warrants on a 75 Porsche, license 076 Mary Ocean John. I'm working this neighborhood. You got any tips for me? Anybody you're after? Be glad to help you out.
Might have somebody here. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do.
How you doing tonight, Spermwell?
Hey, good, Judd. Thanks. Hey, here you go. You find this guy, you give us a call, you hear?
Gosh, thanks. I'll get right on the case.
So you find a new caller now?
Right, thanks. Oh, partner, you're a born blood donor.
Hey, don't you know those guys are either dead or doing time?
10 Delta 1, 75 Porsche, 076, Mary Ocean John. Licensed owner, Carrie Brendan, 5817 Fountain Avenue.
10 Delta 1, Roger.
Hey, she's got a sister. A younger sister. I'm going over to see Father Cheech and Spencer. Have a nice time.
Hey, how are you? You know, you remind me of a girl. Used to live up on Fountain, near where I used to live. It was the 5800 block. I used to see her coming out of her apartment, you know.
I got one creep already, buddy. What do I want with two?
Somebody shooting at us!
Call for help, Cheech. Where'd the shot come from?
I don't know. Somewhere up in the alley.
This is 10 Delta 22 requesting assistance. Officers under fire.
Now, let's go.
Request field supervisor to the scene.
Take it easy. Keep going.
Any officers hit?
No, sir. No officers hit.
Hit the dome light. That's it. Kill the light. Give me your light and my light. Go down one block and cut back. You couldn't have gotten very far. Come on, let's go.
I didn't want to kill him. I never wanted to kill anybody.
He tried to shoot us. He didn't even know us. We're symbols to him.
What establishment do we represent to him?
A blue coat and a badge. They hate the rotten sight of it. We're just blue symbols of garbage. Go make the calls, Cheech.
There will be a meeting today of all officers assigned to Special Investigative Division in the Commander's office. See Officer Mimi for exact time. Officer Gordon, suspect has carriage is ready for booking.
All right, have a seat. Have a seat.
What are you talking about? Oh, no.
Roll call. Lyles. Here. Bloomgard.
Greetings and hallucinations there, Sergeant Yanoff.
10D31. Goodman. Here. Walensky.
Yeah.
10D32. Van Moot.
Here.
Sartino. Here. 10D22. Whalen.
Yo.
Slate.
Present.
10D1. Brown.
Yes, sir.
Kingsley.
Here.
10D13. Motts.
Yeah.
Taniguchi. Taniguchi, you here?
He went to a Bela Lugosi film festival last night, Sarge. He won't answer to his name anymore.
Count Dracula.
Don't be afraid. Come right through the door.
10D74. Rules.
Yeah.
Proust. Proust. Proust.
Oh. Thing's code 4 here, sir.
10D85. Sergeant Green.
Here.
10L30. Sergeant Knight.
There.
10L20. I've been ordered to tell you guys that the captain is uptight about the wino they found sleeping in the lieutenant's car last night. They suspect one of you guys put him there. Oh, come on. Why me? Why me all the time, huh? Well, whoever it was, you better knock it off, okay? Who's working the desk tonight? Anybody know?
Oh, Hadley.
Yeah, well, I wish they'd put one of the Hadleys on day watch so this lineup wouldn't get screwed up. I see the day watch busted Filthy Herman again.
Oh.
Let's see, the MO's the same. Suspect naked except for Dodger baseball cap.
That's Filthy Herman, all right.
Well, it doesn't make any difference anyhow. They never give him any time. They always let him out in a couple of days.
Maybe not this time. The report says he pulled a fire alarm and threw a baseball at a fireman.
Oh, that's a no-no.
Oh, you can beat up cops. But firemen are very popular.
Dummy up.
Whoever shot that sniper last night in 22's area deserves a good smoke.
Captain's such a grand guy. I bet they're 15 centers. Not even.
Brimsley!
You finished reading the crimes, Yanoff?
Yes, Lieutenant.
All right, I've got a few things to say. You can all quit griping about how long you have to wait in night court. I've talked it over with the captain, and he's talked it over with the commander. And he talked it over with the deputy chief.
And he talked it over with Dear Abby, who's really running this department.
For your information, Whalen, the captain happens to be right behind you men.
Yes, sir, I know that. I felt him there many times.
I think the captain was pretty good to you, Whalen, considering your last fitness report. 30 pounds overweight, couldn't get your hands down to your knees, you got a body like an old woman. 5-day suspension was very lenient.
I know that, Lieutenant.
You're coming up for your pension pretty soon, aren't you, Whalen? 7, 8 months, is it?
Excuse me. Coach Kuzo?
Yes.
I'm Catherine Wade. I believe you're expecting me.
I've been brought up in Asia and the Far East, and I want to teach this team everything I've learned in Asia, i.e. not only Taekwondo, which I have a belt in, but Buddhism, Hinduism, Sanskrit, all of the inner wisdom.
USA! USA!
The other members of the American team are portrayed by Christopher Penn, John Dye, David Agresta, and Philip Rhee, a black belt who has actually competed on the international level in real life. For Rhee, who was also one of the film's producers, finding actors who could handle the film's rigorous physical demands was his greatest challenge.
It was very difficult in a sense that martial artists are not actors, and actors are not martial artists. Martial arts usually is conveyed as an exploitation, violent type of picture. The real martial arts is not that of violence, but there's a great beauty in the art.
This week on Review Roundup.
Is this why you brought me here? To give me a formal warning?
No. I didn't bring you here to give you a warning.
Dealers is a drama about the scandalous things that occur in the bedrooms and boardrooms of London's rich and powerful. British actor Paul McGann is a high-rolling stock trader who teams with an equally brilliant but more conservative dealer played by Rebecca De Mornay in an all-out effort to rescue their banking firm from financial ruin.
Look, you're going to be all year digging yourself out of this position unless you commit yourself to some major move.
I don't like the risk.
What's risky about this?
It's maxing one of your spectacular deals.
It works!
It's a damn heat-seeking missile.
You got nice breasts.
That's more than I can say for you.
Dealer star Rebecca De Mornay gained screen recognition as the lusty call girl opposite Tom Cruise in the 1982 summer sleeper Risky Business. More recently, she starred in Roger Vadim's remake of his classic And God Created Woman, as well in the yet unreleased film version of the children's fable Beauty and the Beast. Currently, the 27-year-old actress is involved with a television project, which she hopes to star in and co-produce with John Avnet, producer of Risky Business.
I'm surprised you weren't fired right along with him.
Now here's what some critics are saying about Dealers. There's nothing especially wrong with their performances, except that the two stars look like stand-ins for other people. Mr. McGann, a good actor, has an unfortunately strong resemblance to Mel Gibson. Miss De Mornay comes across here as a Kim Basinger look-alike. Vincent Canby, New York Times. The director, Colin Buxey, has too much style for his own good. It's like a chrome trim laid over a malfunctioning engine full of empty characters and vacuous ethics. Michael Wilmington, Los Angeles Times. Dealers is Wall Street with an English accent, smartly paced but self-deflating by its insistence on imposing an upbeat ending on its otherwise reasonably entertaining grabbers. Jay Carr, Boston Globe.
Really? I'd be surprised if you could get hired shuffling currency in some deadbeat offshore bank.
I get offers twice a month.
Yeah, maybe you should think about taking one of them.
That's what some critics are saying about Dealers. Get the word on the latest movie releases each week on Review Roundup.
More TMC news. Eddie Murphy's new film, Harlem Nights, is having quite a day with audiences. The comedy cashed in $16 million in ticket sales during its box office debut last weekend, and Eddie checked in with no less than 6 film credits, including director, writer, and actor.
And now, here's a blast from the past on the Movie Channel. Imagine staring down the barrel of this at your local theater in the 1950s.
Hey, kids, how would you like to hear this on the screen instead of the great show you came to see? That's what you sound like. Honest. Please cooperate and do your part in keeping this theater quiet so everyone, including you, can enjoy it. Remember, lots of adults and kids, too, paid admission to enjoy the show. We must insist on absolute quiet. Otherwise, we will be forced to evict all disturbance makers from the theater. Those asked to leave today will be refused admission to this theater in the future.
They've kidnapped his son into a world that is terrifying, mystifying, and about to be wiped off the planet.
Stop it!
Powers Boothe, The Emerald Forest. Playing Monday on the Movie Channel. Would you risk your life to save a buddy's?
Don't bet on it.
We'll see when the Movie Channel presents Buddies-in-Law. First, it's James Caan and Mandy Patinkin.
We are not pals.
In Alien Nation. Then, Sidney Poitier has Tom Berenger caught between a rock and a hard place.
Are you okay? Oh!
All for Kirstie Alley in Shoot to Kill. And topping it off, Richard Dreyfuss and Emilio Estevez discover they saw too much.
Come on, come on!
In Stakeout, Buddies-in-Law. You can't beat 'em. Saturday, December 9th on the Movie Channel.
Hi, I'm Robert Osborne from the Movie Channel. I'd like to talk to you about a very serious problem affecting the satellite and cable TV industry and us, the viewers, signal theft. If you buy or sell video cipher descramblers or cable equipment that's been tampered with or illegally tap into cable lines, you could go to jail, pay costly fines, have your business or home raided, cause subscription fees to be raised, and more. It's a federal offense. Don't put yourself in jeopardy. Signal theft. If the deal is a steal, you'll pay.
Some TMC news. Sexy star Kim Basinger has been signed for her first film since the smash hit Batman. Next, she'll sizzle on screen in Sleeping with the Enemy, a contemporary sexual thriller. Ron Bass, the writer who won last year's Oscar for Rain Man, is scripting the story.
What you gotta do, you gotta walk in kind of unsmiling. You gotta look like you're somebody and act like you're somebody, like you can take care of yourself no matter what happens.
Friends, family, and co-stars of the great Gary Cooper assembled recently in Los Angeles for the premiere of a new documentary, Gary Cooper, An American Life, American Legend.
Those kind of qualities that he portrayed a lot on the screen were things that people like to believe maybe was some of the virtues of America.
A couple of years ago, I suddenly looked around and realized it had been 28 years since my father had died, and there had been nothing done about him. And I thought, well, it's time to.
I'm sorry that Gary Cooper is not here to enjoy this. He's one of the most beautiful human beings I ever knew.
He maintained his respect, his individuality, and his beliefs.
Cooper made a remarkable 102 films during his 35 years in the movies. He was a man of action and few words.
I'm sorry.
Cooper was one of a handful of Hollywood greats whose career transcended mere stardom. His quiet dignity and utter lack of pretension became an American ideal. The key to acting, he once said, isn't found in the character's head, but in what the character wears on his head. Cooper was best known for performing in westerns such as High Noon, but he was also one of the screen's best lovers.
There was nobody more romantic. He's one of the great movie stars of our time.
Gary Cooper died in 1961 at the age of 60, but the strength and stature he brought to American films will never be lost.
Thank you.
It started out as an average assignment for two not-so-average cops.
Oh, I love my job so much.
We're supposed to be watching the house, right? So I was watching the house from the inside.
What a bozo. I'm in over my head here.
Get out of the house.
Do you know what I want?
Richard Dreyfuss, Emilio Estevez, Stakeout, playing Tuesday on the Movie Channel. A journey of self-discovery.
Would you ever think of making love to me on the living room floor? I married Ken, and that's all there is to it.
How can you marry Ken? You love me.
Jenna Rollins, Gene Hackman, in Woody Allen's Another Woman. Coming soon on the Movie Channel.
Well, I did very much like On the Waterfront, as we all did in our youth. But, you know, as a young man and on the verge of becoming an actor, just when I was starting acting, you know, the raw intensity and the realistic flavor combined with a real, genuine movie star charisma that Brando and many of the other actors exhibited in that movie, I think had a great effect on me. I mean, I thought, God, movies can really make you stand up and cheer, you know, and